Welcome. I'm Dan Weiss, the President and CEO of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I'm so pleased that you could join us here to celebrate a special event, the newest chapter in our Women in the Critical Eye series. For all who visit the museum, walking toward the facade of the Met Fifth Avenue or the Met Cloisters can feel like journeying back in time. But within these walls, humanity's past intermingles with the present, and there are few areas of the museum's work where that is more apparent than our commitment to performance. We are certainly excited to explore that topic today with all of you. Of course, this program wouldn't be possible without trustee Lulu Wang and the members of the 2021 Women in the Critical Eye Committee, whose enthusiasm and support has allowed this initiative to grow and evolve. Thank you, Lulu, for everything that you do, and thanks to all of you. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Max Holein, the Marina Kellen-French Director of the Met.
Thanks, Dan, and hello all. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this special virtual presentation of Women and the Critical Eye. I want to thank you for joining us and for your ongoing support. We are so grateful to Lulu Wang, who always makes this program a success. I'm happy to see its impact grow year to year, now reaching more people than ever before through our digital platforms. The Met has long engaged with performance in its many iterations, from the incredibly popular concert series organized by the great conductor, violinist, and activist David Manis, starting in 1918, to operas for children in the early 1970s, and fast-forwarding a few more decades, the introduction of our first artist-in-residence, DJ Spooky, in 2012. That all led to the diverse live arts program you see today, where performance has become increasingly central to our mission as we engage with the art of our time in conversation with the art historical past. Whether the result is an iconic piece played on a piano from our own collection in the musical instruments galleries, or an original site-specific work inspired by one of our external spaces, each presentation is a rare opportunity for the audience to have a shared, evocative experience alongside the artist. Our speakers today know well the impact of music, words, movement, and sound, modes of aesthetic creation that continue to play a pivotal role in reshaping notions of what art can be and how it relates to the world. Like you, I'm eager to hear their thoughts on the past, present, and future of performance and art. Thank you again for joining us. We are grateful for everything you do to make the Met such an amazing place. Lulu would now like to say a few words.
Thank you, Max and Dan. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to this year's virtual presentation of Women and the Critical Eye. For 16 years now, this annual program has supported women's interest and engagement in the arts by inviting talented women collectors and experts to share with our group their insight into important areas of art and collecting. We are now a wonderful community of several hundred strong, and we have had great fun learning together with our talented Met curators and getting to know each other well. Now, thanks to the enthusiasm of our community, we have another fabulous program this year. Our event is once again unticketed, and with the generous donations of so many of you from all around the world, Women and the Critical Eye will remain free. Our group will also be able to contribute again this year to the Met's acquisition of works by important women artists. Your past gifts have enabled us to help the museum acquire Wangechimutu's historic sculpture, The Seated Three, which was part of the inaugural commission for the Met's Fifth Avenue facade. We are truly grateful for your friendship and your support of the Critical Eye and of the museum's acquisition of art by noted women artists. The Seated Three will forever recognize the contributions of our Women in the Critical Eye group, and when it is back on view inside the museum, I encourage you all to come and visit her. Today, I'm delighted to welcome another exciting group of women into our eye tradition of exploration and fellowship. I want to thank Sarah Arison, Bijayini Satpathy, Lauren Rosati, and Limor for being here with us, and for sharing their thoughts on the intersection of performance and art. They will explore with us why the two, performance and art, are so naturally additive to each other. I can't wait to hear from them. So here is Limor Tomer, the Lulu C. and Anthony W. Wang General Manager of LiveArts, to formally introduce our speakers and lead today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan, Max, and Lulu. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Limor Tomer, and I'm the Lulu C. and Anthony W. Wang General Manager for LiveArts. And I'm so thrilled to be here hosting this year's Women and the Critical Eye. Today, we're going to delve into the world of performance, live arts, performing arts. We'll get into nomenclature in a minute. And to lead us through, we have three extraordinary women. We have Lauren Rosati, who's a curator here at the Met in Modern Contemporary. We have Bijayini Satpathy, our artist in residence, coming up, who is an extraordinary dancer and choreographer. And of course, we have Sarah Arison, who is the chair of the board of YoungArts. And together, we will have a free-flowing conversation about performance, both at the Met and in general. And to start us off, I will ask Lauren Rosati to walk us through performing arts. Lauren, so lots of different names, live arts, performance art, performing arts. Are there differences? Is it all the same? Walk us through it.
Mm-hmm. Right, well, there's performing arts on the one hand, or what we might call performing arts, music, dance, theater, opera, art forms that have been around for millennia and that have their own histories and references and forms of training and venues and audiences. And then there's performance art, which is a much more recent phenomena that dates arguably to the turn of the 20th century and that engages with the discourses of visual art. And this is something that is really defined by its liveness. It's something that happens in front of us in real time. But when we talk about performance art today, we're really talking about the legacies of post-war experimental practices from the late 50s and 60s, like the Fluxus happenings or the performances of Japanese gutai, these events that require bodily participation or the action of a performer. And these often collapse or blur the boundaries between performing arts, like having choreographed dance in connection with music, for example.
Right. So, for example, artists like Wang Mutu, who was the focus of last year's Women in the Critical Eye, her practice obviously includes performance, and she did an extraordinary performance for us in 2017 called Banana Strokes, which was staged on the stage of Grace Rainey Rogers, which a lot of the stuff has happened at, but also in galleries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. And Wangechi is somebody who you wouldn't normally think about as a performance artist, but performance, it's not an artistic medium in the true sense of the word. It's really a set of concerns and approaches that an artist can use, something from their toolkit.
So to get real fast, I have encountered a little bit of hesitation or sometimes negativity around the notion of performance art, and I feel like we might benefit from some context, because maybe that is a reaction to something that it was very specific to a time and a place. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think when people think about performance art, or when they hear that phrase, what comes to mind is something that has a lot of shock value, or a performance that uses the body in a base or an abject way, something violent like Viennese actionism or other post-war experimental practices that set up this relational antagonism between the performer and the spectator. And that is a really important part of performance arts history, but it's much more expansive and varied and diverse than that.
And also, I would say you can't really talk about certain visual art practice without talking about performance.
Yes, these are deeply imbricated. The histories of performing arts, music, dance, theater, poetry, and the visual arts, they go hand in hand. You can't talk about Robert Rauschenberg, for instance, without understanding the work of Merce Cunningham or John Cage or Trisha Brown. And you can't fully know the work of Namjoon Paik, for example, without knowing about his collaborative practice with Charlotte Moorman, the great cellist.
And also today, we have examples of artists embarking on performance art projects that are quite expansive and quite poetic. The project that you and I got to work on, Vessel Orchestra. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's a great example, and it was a really exciting moment for the Met to do that project. So, as you know, the Vessel Orchestra was an exhibition project at the Met Breuer, It was the first sound-based commission for the Met and a project by the artist Oliver Beer. And Oliver worked with 5 curatorial departments at the Met to choose 32 objects from the Met's collection, all of them vessels, jars, utilitarian objects, all sorts of things. And he chose them not for their aesthetic character, or not exclusively for their aesthetic character or for their cultural history, but more for their acoustic resonance, for the innate frequency inside every hollow object. And he dropped a microphone inside of them to pull out that frequency. So he chose these 32 objects, he arranged them in an installation, like a kind of unorthodox musical instrument. And these vessels corresponded to 32 consecutive notes on the chromatic musical scale. So he wrote a piece of music for these vessels that played during normal museum hours. And then we invited a great group of performers to activate that in live performance. So it's a great example that objects can be performative and that the artist, as a creator herself, can be a performer and an active agent in the creation of a work and its meaning.
So that work which was installed for, I think, 10 weeks in Met Royer. It was an installation, it was a sound installation, and it was a live performance venue and a living instrument.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about the history of performance at the Met Museum, because this is a history that I actually only realize now that how little I knew about it.
And I think that's the case with a lot of people. They don't think about the Met as a performing institution. But the history of performance at the Met goes back at least as far as 1917, so more than 100 years ago. And at that time, David Manis, who was the great violinist and concertmaster of the New York Symphony Orchestra, he conducted a series of free concerts at the Met for returning servicemen initially after World War I. And these concerts happened regularly on an annual basis, as far as I can tell, until the late 1940s. But the images of these events are extraordinary because they show people just packed shoulder to shoulder in the Great Hall to witness performance. And our records indicate that as many as 17,000 people attended these concerts at the height of their popularity in the early 1920s in a space that's really meant for about a quarter that number of people. So that really shows you the power of performance, that it's baked into the Met's DNA, that it had, it kind of underscores the significance of it in our history that things happened so early.
But things get really heated in the 70s, don't they, in terms of performance?
Right. In 1968, the Met hires Hilda Limanjian as the manager of auditorium events because Grace Rainey Rogers, our auditorium, opens in 1954. So in 68, she's hired, and she's a chamber musician, so she brings that history and experience with her to the Met. So there's, again, a lot of traditional work happening in the performance area. But then the early 1970s is this very interesting moment where experimental art kind of erupts into the museum at the same time that it happens in New York City. So in the early 1970s, for example, there's this whole series of incredible experimental projects she does, including a concert with the avant-garde composer Limanjian and his wife Marian Zazila and Pandit Prannath, the Indian classical musician who was Young's mentor. And Young at the time was known for the perpetual drones of his Theater of Eternal Music. And he's probably best known today for the Dream House, which is an installation above his loft space, which he installed in the mid-90s. But interestingly, the Met premiered an early version of the Dream House in 1971. And around that time, there were a number of other experimental music concerts, like the group Sonic Arts Union, which was an experimental collective of composers, Alvin Lucier, Robert Ashley, Gordon Mumma, David Behrman, who were inspired by John Cage and David Tudor and pioneered a whole host of practices that are now common to experimental performance, like the use of homemade instruments and live electronics. But aside from experimental music, there's also jazz and blues. So Nina Simone performs at the Met, B.B. King, the great jazz pianist, Cecil Taylor. And then there's interesting things happening with dance in this 70s moment too. So Merce Cunningham, the great modern dancer, performs at the Met. And most famously, I would say, since the images still exist, is Twyla Tharp, who very early in her career and early in the days of her company performed a new piece in the Great Hall and the Great Hall steps called Dancing in the Streets. And the images are great. They show dancers in blue jeans, performing simultaneous movements around the museum. So the early 1970s is a really important experimental moment.
Right. And speaking of the Great Hall Stair, of course, our former artist in residence, Julia Bullock, staged a gorgeous and very moving, evocative performance called Pearl Noir on the stairs at the Met, and that was part of her artist residency. And speaking of artist residency, I now want to turn to our upcoming artist resident, Bijayini Satpathy.
Hello.
You are an extraordinary dancer. You've been lionized around the world as one of the leading proponents of Odissi Indian classical dance. But today you're here with us as a choreographer and a performance artist. It's been quite a journey. We've been on this part of this journey together. So tell us a little bit about your personal story, how you got from Odissi to the Met.
I have been a student of Odissi dance for a very long time, almost 40 years. And I consider my first 15 years was like a student. I was a student. I studied in Orissa, then I moved to Nrityagram, the dance village, where I became the principal dancer. And I performed the choreographer's work in the dance company until 2018. And in 2019, there was a need for me to discover my voice. And that search, that quest led me to reaching out to you, seeking opportunities, and here I am.
Bijayini, you've been on some of the world's greatest stages in so many different cities, from Mumbai to Tel Aviv to all over Europe to Latin America to the US. And here you will be working not in a theater necessarily, but also in galleries. So talk a little bit about that.
Odissi dance takes us back to the temples where it was housed and performed. And I have always felt extremely alive when I have gone to the temples to study the sculptures from which it has been resurrected 70 years ago, the dance form. So whenever I go back to historical places, which takes us back to ancient times with beautiful artwork, it can be sculpture, painting, an object, there is a certain conversation that begins to take place in my embodied art, between the embodied art and the space itself. So I begin to feel very different, as if in conversation with the space as I experience my art. So dancing in a gallery, dancing in a space where there are historical objects or objects that carry the memory of the past, there is a certain relevance and importance to living the art, another ancient art in that space.
There are so many of us who will never ever forget the feeling and the power of seeing you perform in front of the Temple of Dendur. It was really a life-changing moment. This past month, you've spent so many hours and days in our galleries with our curators. You've seen a lot, you've looked at a lot of works of art. Can you talk a little bit about some that captured your imagination more than others, or that stay with you or inspire you?
Well, the one that really stays very close to my heart and kind of stays very, very tightly close is Sam Gilliam's work, which is, I think, the carousel. He talks about the drape painting. And since then, we have gone to the Beacon and we have looked at more of that. But the thing is that in a short time, I wouldn't say 3 weeks is a lot of time, but in that short time, I have got so much information. You know, I might have walked by some things and not really registered them, but as a dancer, we are very connected to imagery. So all the images, all the colors, all the pictures, all the patterns that I'm passing by remain somehow inside me. So it's a sea of things inside me right now. So I'm just waiting to see what becomes a stream out of that, with clarity of certain idea and a thought, and becomes a piece of work through my body.
You're unique in every way, but you're not the first choreographer to be artist in residence at the Met.
Yes.
A few years ago, we invited the choreographer Andrea Miller to be our artist in residence. And Andrea talks about her choreographic work before the Met and after the Met. I know that you had an opportunity to talk to her a little bit. Tell us more about your conversation with her.
I think the most important thing that she said to me that remains with me is that what you do in the space is what will be the final work. So trust that more than taking the information with you and going to your own studio space. So what becomes very clear to me is that it's important to be creating the work or some part of the finalizing the work in the space itself, in the spaces itself, because it's not necessary that the work is one piece. And she said that you are a very superb listener to ideas, artistic ideas, and you make things possible. So that's what I'm excited about.
It's one of the things that I love about my work is that I get to work with living artists who are making work in real time that require our body and their body to be in the same space, all of which was upended by the pandemic, which we'll get to in a minute.
Yes, yeah.
But when we talk about performance at the Met, yes, we are sort of taking our visitors and our audience and our supporters along a road that's maybe a little bit outside of what they're used to, but we also do that to the artists. We really invite the artists to think not so much linearly. The value that we give to a formal performance versus a work development or a process that happens in a gallery, in our case, those might have equal value.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. I'm looking at it that way too. It requires research. The influence can be strong from one gallery, from one object, one piece of art. But like I said before, that placing that in the context, placing it through my body, because it's gone to school. It's got a lot of conditioning. So bringing that over, it's influencing, it's the intersection of cultures that have always influenced all art forms. So even my art form is not just a dance tradition. It is a repository of philosophy, music, mythology, sculpture, architecture, a lot of things. And those things are not standing alone in the context of just Indian religion or Indian culture. They have had trades happen with other countries. So those intersections have influenced every art, and those arts now live in my body. And now I'm forcing it open up to other cultures. So I feel like when I take even what my body will do in response to an art and place it, let's say, in this courtyard, how I will embody it or experience it will be very different, and audience will view it in a very different way.
Bijayini, I understand that you have a personal connection to the work of our third participant today, Sarah Arison. So tell us a little bit about that.
But the YoungArts Foundation of Sarah they reached out to me last year in 2020 to join their foundation as a mentor, to mentor in the summer two, I think, Asian artists that they had, young artists that they had selected from the group of artists to further their training, to work with them and create a piece of work. We just didn't have good timing because I live in India and it's here. So we are hoping that in the future, when I am here, we can do some collaboration in the future. But that's a lovely, wonderful prospect. And I was so happy to learn that this happens.
Thank you so much. I now want to turn to our third guest, Sarah Arison, who is the chair of the board of the YoungArts Foundation. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting. What an incredible group of people to be a part of.
Sarah, tell us, first of all, tell us a little bit about YoungArts and how you got involved.
So YoungArts was actually founded in 1981 by my grandparents, Lynn and Ted Arison. My grandfather wanted to be a concert pianist growing up, and he did not find the support from his family, the educational community, or even the community at large to pursue that. He was told to go get a real job. So he did, and when he reached a point that he was able to give back, he looked at my grandmother and he said, I never want another young, talented, passionate artist to go through what I went through. I want them to have everything that they need to pursue an education and a career in the arts. And that was the beginning of YoungArts. So the core program of YoungArts began with a 1-week intensive in Miami. So we would get applications from artists of all disciplines from all across the country and choose the top 170 to come to Miami for Arts Week, which is a week, still exists, but now we have 4 Arts Weeks, 2 in Miami, 1 in Los Angeles, and 1 in New York. So actually we have 500 artists a year now who go through Arts Week. But in the beginning, it was that 1 intensive week in Miami. So it's a week of classes with mentors who are real luminaries in their field. So for example, Baryshnikov for dance or Renee Fleming for voice. And then workshops, not only within their own discipline, but as well as interdisciplinary. So putting a writer and a filmmaker and a dancer together and giving them, half a day and some equipment and saying, go make something. Performances, which are open to the public, and adjudications. They receive unrestricted scholarships from us. And then they are really identified by universities and conservatories who know that we are finding the best of the best to bring them into their freshman year. So it really ends up being a double scholarship in most cases, unrestricted from us, and an academic from a university that finds them through us. And about a decade ago, we decided that, while it is so important to continue to focus on that first critical juncture, there are so many other critical junctures in the life of an artist. And so we really started looking at how can we offer the artists who go through our program a lifetime of support. So not just that first transition, but as they continue their education and as they begin their career. And we've really done that by focusing on cultural partners. We can do that 15 to 18 age group really well. We've been doing it for 40 years. There are so many organizations out there who are phenomenal and who have been working also for decades with artists who are a little bit further along in their lives and careers. And so it's through this cultural partnership model, which the Met, the musical instrument department at the Met, is one of our longest and most cherished cultural partners. The programming is extraordinary and has been going on now for a decade, that we're able to offer this continued sense of community and continued opportunities.
And LiveArts also has made major commissions
Yes.
of YoungArts graduates. And we can't really talk about supporting young artists without talking about commissioning. LiveArts at the Met, the core of what we do is commissioning new work. And that becomes, in a sense, a collection, if you will, of works that were created within the context of the Met and presented here for the first time. And I think that's something that you also are very close to, the notion of commissioning and creating a body of new work.
I think commissioning is vital. Artists are rarely given that opportunity, freedom, access, funding, all of these things that are necessary to create a totally new body of work. And so for institutions like the Met or YoungArts or any of the other institutions that commission work, to give artists that opportunity is really transformative. It is giving them the time, space, and resources that they need to push their own boundaries, to take risks, to collaborate with other artists. And that is, I think, really how the career of an artist can get pushed forward, is through commissioning and through that freedom, which is often very hard to find elsewhere.
And freedom is a really important word, and that is something that is terrifying when an artist like Bijayini is invited to create new work for the Met and has all the freedom. It's not in a box, it's not on a stage, it doesn't need to be 60 minutes, it doesn't have to have an intermission. It's an open invitation, an open commission to create work, and that pushes artists way out of their comfort zone. And it's funny because whether you're an 18-year-old artist or a mature artist at the top of your game, it's still a terrifying notion. For example, we worked with Lee Ming-wei and Bill T. Jones on the first piece, the first live work that we did here at the museum after COVID was in August of 2020. And it was a very slow, very moving gallery-based performance that was about 19 hours long over 4 weeks. And it was sort of heart-melting to watch these great artists just trying to figure out how to manage the museum, its collection, its meaning. You walk into every gallery, it's full of meaning and narratives. We don't have, empty galleries to work with. And it was just astounding to see them at the top of their game, these artists, negotiating the same kind of issues that the teenagers are negotiating at a different time in their lives. I'm so excited to be here this afternoon with these extraordinary women, luminaries, my teachers, people I look up to so much. And I feel like we really need to start with the issue that's in the center of the room, which is what we've just all been through in the past 15 months, the pandemic. And we are all dealing with all of those emotions, and we've all been supporting artists through this time. And we've also learned a lot about the power of performance and how important that relationship is between the performers and the audience, to be in the same room with the energy flowing back and forth. And we've tried to compensate for that, emulate that. People need to work. Work continues to be made, but right now on the digital space. So why don't we start with you, Sarah? Talk to us a little bit about your artists and your cohort, and how are they dealing with all of this?
So I think back in March, when we all realized that this was going to be very serious and it was not going to go away anytime soon, we at YoungArts realized that artists were going to be some of the hardest hit. And also some of the most under-recognized, that they were being hit so hard. People were hearing a lot about hospitality workers, but they were not hearing about artists. And the reality is that so many artists, they are gig workers. They are paid on performance, they are paid on rehearsal. A lot of them might not have regular health insurance. And so we decided that we had to act very quickly to help our community. And this is not just our community of artists at YoungArts, but the community at large. And we knew that if we wanted to act quickly, we couldn't do it alone. So we came together with 6 other not-for-profit arts organizations to create Artist Relief. And we were able, because of collaboration, nobody could have done this alone, we were able to raise $10 million in 10 days. And immediately start getting out $5,000 unrestricted grants out the door. So, we wanted these checks to go out as quickly as possible, because people were dealing with, not being able to pay their rent, not being able to take care of their families, their healthcare, not being able to feed their families. And so this was really for basic human necessities. This wasn't to keep a studio space or continue a body of work. These were basic human needs. And when we launched it, the day that we launched it, there was this moment of cognitive dissonance, because we were so excited. We had done such an extraordinary thing and raised so much money, but we launched it and the website crashed because we got so many applications just in the first day. There were over 40,000 applications day one. And it made us realize, one, the amount of need that there was in the artistic community, but also how tenuous life is for so many artists. I think the pandemic really highlighted that. And so we continue to raise money, continue to give out grants. We'll actually continue to give out grants through the summer. So that's kind of what we did to try to help the community as quickly as possible. From there, we also did, for people that were a part of, had gone through YoungArts, the program, we did emergency micro grants as well. So really trying to figure out how are we getting people what they need as soon as possible. And then from an artistic side, I think that performing arts were the most difficult through this pandemic. It is really hard, dance, for example. To think about choreographing a piece for film, you have to think about a camera, which if you are in a theater, you are not really having to think about a camera, you are thinking about a live audience.
Absolutely.
And so the way that dancers, choreographers thought and started to put together work, I think was completely different. But I also saw incredible innovation. I'm president of the board of American Ballet Theater, and I saw so many of our dancers become choreographers or become filmmakers and really push the boundaries of themselves as artists, not just dancers, but push those boundaries to adapt to this new format. With YoungArts, we wanted to still have our YoungArts Week, which I was talking about earlier, but make it virtual, which was quite a feat to think about. How do you go through a week of classes and workshops and performances and adjudication entirely virtually? And again, I think the performing arts, it was the most difficult to adapt. I am in awe of all of the mentors who worked with us, who came up with a way to engage with these students. I think we are lucky because these 15 to 8-year-olds were a lot more comfortable in the digital realm than I would have ever been. They also, had been doing virtual learning for probably about 9 months at that point. So there had been some experimentation with that, and I think there was a level of comfort with it. But, we did, Desmond Richardson, who is an alum as well as a board member, actually choreographed a piece for the winners in dance. And I watched, a rehearsal, and there were dancers in their bedrooms, in their parents' kitchens, out on the fire escape. And they were watching Desmond on screen, and he was able to put together a beautiful piece with these artists who were based all across the country, and none of them had ever met in person. So it was definitely a time of experimentation. Like I said, I am in awe of all the artists who adapted so quickly to this new and often very difficult medium, and thinking about engaging with a camera as opposed to a live audience.
Well, if I could jump in too, I wanted to say, what you just said about the digital sphere bringing together distant collaborators as one maybe positive that's come out of digital performance. I think it's really enhanced performance in a lot of ways in terms of expanding audiences and decreasing barriers to access, and to think about what it means to make a performance in the digital space, to commission someone to create a work intended for that sphere of activity rather than trying to replicate the experience of being in person with all of the energy that requires. I think that's really exciting. And the commissioning model for digital performance, I hope that that's something that continues, because it displaces the ephemerality of live performance with this mediated, instantaneous access, which is exciting.
And yet, there's nothing like being in the same room, in the same space, and feeling that the heart of the performer.
Completely. I couldn't agree more, because I landed my first choreographic work landed in the lap of the pandemic. It was for Baryshnikov Arts Center. I was creating my first work. I created the piece. My musicians were here in New York, so the coordination with them was day and night. So their early morning, my night, my early morning, their night, to get any information across. We were used to being in one room, and you say something and that gets translated into melody, rhythm, and then they come up with something, and that immediately becomes an idea, and then you embody it, and choreography begins to happen like that. And suddenly it's waiting and waiting and waiting. So the time gets extended and expanded. There is a level of frustration. But what I realized most is that the first time I danced, I completed the piece and had someone watch me, is when I started feeling like it had life. And it could be, I have also questioned that it could be that we are conditioned to always being in front of somebody. The school I danced in has always visitors visiting when we are rehearsing and practicing. So there is always that give and take of energy. But now that this year is extended to another year, I feel more and more the need of performance arts to be live. When I'm also thinking of words, the camera captures, it records, whereas an audience witnesses. They watch, witness, it's a spectacle. There is give and take, there is an energy exchange. And I definitely in my body, I feel it when I'm having just two people sit there and watch. I'm just getting feedback, doing a first review. It has to be live.
Yeah, I think back to what you said about digital, I do think it was a moment where a lot of us realized the wider audiences that we could reach if there was a digital component. And these are people who would have never been able to see the program, to get to know the organization if it weren't for that digital component. And so I think the way I'm thinking about things going forward is to have the IRL component, the in real life component, and the URL component. And I think, at least for me, this was a little bit of a silver lining in this whole mess was, let's think about bringing the arts to as many people as possible, no matter where they are.
Live arts performances from the Met have reached over 1 million people in the last 15 months. So, and again, from all over the world, and people are just, it's nourishing, it's oxygen, it gives them connection and community, and the comments we're getting are just amazing. So we definitely want to keep that and keep nurturing that.
Like you said, Sarah, it's both of these things. The future of performance is in both. It's in liveness and in the digital sphere. But I appreciated what you were saying, Bijayini, about the need to be in a room with the performer, both for the performer and the spectator, to share that energy. There's a lot of theories of performance, but one of them is Peggy Phelan, who wrote an important book about performance and about liveness. And she says that the definition of performance is in its disappearance, that when it is recorded, when there's a video or a photograph or some record of that live event, it becomes something else entirely.
Lauren and I have had many, many conversations, not going to call it arguments, but I'm going to say conversations about what is the document, what is the performance, where is the line between the performance and the document, and what happens when a document enters a collection or a performance enters a collection. And in fact, Lauren, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about the Met's collection of performance.
Yeah, the Met has a small but significant and growing collection of time-based media, mostly video, some of which are documents of performances. And these include some of the most important performance artists of the last 50 years, Bruce Nauman, Vito Acconci, Andrea Fraser. This began around 2000 in the photographs department and began as a collection from our former curator, Doug Eklund. And now both the photographs department and modern and contemporary are collecting performance art. And
one of the fields that we sort of went into, we being Live Arts at the Met, was how do we take this moment when audience cannot be present and make something that is not a record of a performance, but something else. And so, for example, we just recorded Leila Josefowicz playing the great Bach D minor partita in a gallery featuring a Jackson Pollock and a Mark Rothko. And the hope is that those three masters, Jackson Pollock, Bach, and Mark Rothko, add up to more than the sum of the parts. And I think in this case they did, and her performance was so informed by the energy that was being given by these very different types of temperatures and colors and intentionality, and then Bach sort of going in between all of that and sort of the sacred secular and the organized chaos and the sort of the range of emotion and intellectual rigor. And I feel like that is the kind of work that I'm looking forward to developing more with artists and partnering with artists and with this new kind of artist of camera to make work that is sort of, that is new, and maybe the record is the work of art.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because for me as a curator, it's not so much can you collect performance or how do you collect performance, because this has been happening for decades in museums. It's really, where is the performance? So there's the live event that unfolds in real time, that happens before us, and then there's the event that's captured in a record, whether it's a video or a photograph or a score or instructions for reperforming it after the fact. And that's the thing that remains, that is exhibited and collected and preserved and replayed and repeated. So it's this interesting contradiction. Where is the performance? Is it this original, unrepeatable, performable live event? Or is it the copy, the reproduction, the representation? And so those questions about immediacy and mediation and the way that they work together is important as a curator and as artists, probably, for thinking about how your work enters the world.
And one of the examples that I could give of that is our the commission that we did with the Indian artist Nikhil Chopra, who created a performance for the Met that consisted of him describing sort of a journey throughout the Met, where he would stop at certain galleries and erect a kind of a domicile or a tent or a habitation area. And then during the 12 days that he was in the Met 24/7, never left, he made this panoramic drawing, landscape drawing, that he worked on throughout those 12 days. So the performance happened. There remains of the performance, and there is the experience of just people coming to the Met and happening on this event happening in front of them. And then, of course, there was the final performance that was very much performative, very theatrical, where he sort of attempts to leave the building. And that was an incredible experience, which I was very proud to work on with my co-curator, Shanae Javeri, from the Modern Contemporary Department at the Met. And one of the most fun parts of this is to think about where are the lines and how fun is it to watch them shift in real time.
Well, that's what I think is so interesting about performance, is because it lends itself and in fact needs to be very interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. And I feel like the days of artists being defined by one discipline are kind of over.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. And even thinking about, the way a museum collects, this is the painting and sculpture department, this is the architecture design department, this is the, media and performance. It doesn't seem as relevant anymore because artists are crossing so many disciplines, working with other artists from so many different disciplines, and it ends up being kind of this beautiful blend of everything. That doesn't fall neatly into any of these categories, but is so much more than any one of those categories could be.
All arts have been, to me, they have all been interdisciplinary. They have taken from like a sculpture stands and you see dance in it, but it's sculpture, that's the medium. You see it like that. In a dancer's body, you see culmination of lots of information coming from sculpture. Art becomes the repository of everything else that surrounds it. So I think all of it has to come together somehow. Somehow we make relevant the interconnectedness of disciplines of art, at the same time allow for new work to grow and not just end with the documentation, just end with the first performance of it and then that's where it ends. Because for me as an artist, I feel like it has much more to do and much more to grow that needs to live on through performances, live performances mostly.
And nothing makes me happier than when works that we commission, that by definition must be site-specific, have a life and they move on and they become iterative, and there's a version that happens in the Châtelet in Paris, and then a version that happens in Buenos Aires, and a version that travels to Seoul, Korea. Like we had a piece by the choreographer John Higginbotham with the ensemble Alarm Will Sound. That evening was called Twinned because it was the music and the dancers sort of twinned. And those pieces traveled on and became part of a bigger body of work. And I just love that when that happens. And I feel like the Met has this opportunity that it's really stepping into to take a leadership role in all of this, and to lead this conversation around commissioning artists and performance, commissioning performance work, documenting performance work, building a collection of time-based art, engaging with artists on ephemeral work. all of that, and really supporting artists in all of their disciplines. You know, if they make works on paper, but they also make video and they also make performance. We are now the kind of institution that is able to handle all of that and welcome it and hold it. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm so incredibly proud of, to be part of the Met, that we are so much in the forefront of those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that I've been asking, like, you know, talking about the history of performance at the Met and collecting and working with artists, is what does it mean for a place like the Met that collects objects and the most significant objects from 5,000 years of human history? What does it mean for a place like the Met to collect performance and to engage with human activity in that level, or not even just to collect performance, but to include it within the structure of the institution? How does it engage with history? And as an artist, you're engaging with history in
Yes. I think it's just earlier times we have talked about this, that the body becomes the embodiment of collections. We you know, the intangible, everything, all the ideas, all the aesthetics that come to us through the eyes, through all five senses, they get translated into movement, moving. I feel privileged and I feel blessed that I have this opportunity in this time, especially in this time when there is just everything is just gone away from us. I feel so privileged to have had this opportunity, and I treat it with a lot of respect and responsibility to carry forward this tradition.
I think we should let the performer have the last word. And I just wanted to thank you all so much. Sarah, such a pleasure, and thank you for the insights and the support to the artists. Bijayini, I'm so excited to work with you, and we can't wait to welcome you in the fall again for performances. And Lauren, you and I will continue to debate and work together.
Absolutely.
And thank you for your insights and
Thank
your
you.
and your deep research.
Thank you and
knowledge.
all of you. This has been great.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you,
This is
Limor.
wonderful.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much again for joining us for this year's Women and the Critical Eye. Our heartfelt thanks to friends who've been able to support this annual event, to keep it free, and to serve as a resource for women at the Met. If you haven't already and would like to help, we would be thrilled to receive a gift from you at any level. For more information on ways to give, please refer to our museum's website or the email with your link to this event. In the meantime, please stay well, enjoy your summer, and we all look forward to seeing you at the Met very soon. Thank you.